Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Today on the pod, we're talking about success. What does it mean to you? How or when can you achieve it? What does it cost? In a bit, we're looking at a book that explores late bloomers, folks who didn't pop off until they were a bit older. Of course, older is relative, which is sort of the point. But first, I grew up in a type of house where an A- wasn't good enough and a B was a failure. And I thought that was rough, but Jennifer Wallace's book, Never Enough, talks about teens under an even more intense amounts of pressure to do better. And it comes with some serious mental health consequences. She talked to Here and Now's Deepa Fernandes as the school year was ending for many kids about her reporting and what these kids wish they could tell their parents. That's ahead.
Support for NPR and the following message come from our sponsor, Whole Foods Market. Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the Hot Grill Summer event through July 16th, with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
We're firmly in the middle of high school finals time. It can be an incredibly stressful period for students and for their parents too. Questions swirl in many heads. How hard should I push them? What can I do to help? Should I help? If we aren't careful, we can tip the scales quickly and dangerously towards too much pressure on our kids as we push them to do more and more. Journalist Jennifer Wallace calls this the toxic achievement culture and wrote about it in her book, Never Enough. She joins me now. Jenny, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Let's start with a definition here. What is toxic achievement?
Yes, achievement can become toxic when it is so tangled up in our sense of self that we only feel worthy and lovable when we're achieving. Inevitable failures and setbacks are not seen as bumps in the road, but rather an indictment of who we are, that we are worthless and inadequate. And so this mindset, always feeling like who we are deep inside isn't enough, is toxic for mental health.
And much of this toxic achievement culture is happening in wealthy communities where parents have resources to, say, hire tutors or pay for private lessons or pay for private college coaches or counselors. Things that I imagine other parents probably wish they could do for their kids, but you find it's not leading to healthy outcomes. Why?
Yeah, well, many of the students that I interviewed, and I interviewed hundreds around the country, described living their life in a kind of gilded pressure cooker. So shiny on the outside, but punishing inside. Every win sets an even higher expectation, harder classes, tougher tournaments. Even activities that are supposed to be fun and stress-reducing, like playing a sport or an instrument, have become a means to an end, a padding for life's resume and getting them into a quote-unquote good college. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, achievement mattered, but it didn't define my life the way it seems to so many young people today.
And you point out through many of these young people who you talk to, but also just your scan of a lot of data that's out there, that in fact, there's a real mental health crisis going on, and it's happening as well in what seems to be these perfect communities where kids could have anything they want. How bad is it?
As you said, it's not just my findings. Two national policy reports, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the National Academies of Sciences, have found that students attending these quote-unquote high-achieving schools, as they call them, are now officially at risk, meaning they are 2 to 6 times more likely to suffer from clinical levels of anxiety and depression, and 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse disorder than the average American teen. So researchers who study this population say that this excessive pressure could be impacting as many as 1 in 3 students.
I mean, that's a lot. And I know in your book, you found some real examples where communities are tackling this head on and getting students the resources that they need. But I want to just focus for a sec on the teens, and you spoke to many of them. How are they not just dealing with this, but processing it? Because they're the ones in the middle of the pressure cooker.
Oh, absolutely. And I will tell you, they are incredibly articulate. And frankly, my conversations with them were heartbreaking. Along with interviewing hundreds of teens, I also conducted a survey with the help of a researcher at Baylor of 500 young adults, mostly college-age kids, and I asked them what they wish their parents knew about the pressure they felt when they were in high school. And the responses were hard to read. I'll tell you a couple of the responses. One said that their parents' pressure to be an overachiever was the catalyst for their depression and anxiety issues. Another student said it felt like my worth was tied to my grades. And another student said, I wish my parents knew that it was okay for me to get less than perfect grades sometimes. It's okay not to be exceptional in everything.
You also talk to parents. I don't think any parent would want to push their child to a mental health crisis or some of the things that you're hearing, but why? Why is it not okay for us as parents to settle for less than perfect grades? Or what's driving this?
What's going on? So when I was growing up in the 70s and the early 80s, life was generally more affordable. Housing, healthcare, health insurance, there was slack in the system. Parents could be relatively assured that even without a perfect resume, their kids would probably be able to replicate their own childhoods in adulthood, if not do even better than their own parents did. But modern parents, we are facing a different reality. We are seeing the first generation, the millennials, who are not doing as well as their parents on average. We are feeling the crush of the middle class. We are feeling the steep inequity that's been ushered in over the last few decades. And what I found in my reporting is that parents are betting big that early childhood success, getting their kids into a quote-unquote good college, they hope will act as a kind of life vest in a sea of economic uncertainty. But unfortunately, that life vest that we are trying so hard to protect them with is drowning too many of the kids we are trying to protect.
So we're pushing for kids to be overachievers. We're filling their every spare minute not spent on academics with extracurricular activities, because now to get into college, you have to have this padded resume, as you point out. So sports, music, volunteering, and then some kids have to work to earn money, which leaves no time for, just as my 12-year-old would say, chillin', no time for relaxing, no unstructured time. What kind of an impact, when you talked to teens, does that have?
What I heard from so many young people was that it reinforced the message that they were their achievements, that their well-being, their mental health can be sacrificed at the altar of achievement.
But part of me, Jenny, thinks that the way kids spend unstructured time these days is not how you and I did it when we were growing up. But today, it really feels like they're on their phones, they're doom scrolling, they're on social media, or playing video games, all of which have documented negative consequences as well. It just seems like there are no good options here.
Yes, and this is where parents can really come in. The parents of the healthy strivers, as I call them in the book, had this in common. These parents thought it was their job as a parent to teach their kids how to build a balanced life, one that they won't need drugs or alcohol to escape from. So these parents taught their kids how to take downtime, insisted on it, insisted on family time, insisted on time outside. So this is really where a parent involvement could really come into play.
One of your solutions is to make kids know that their grades, their achievements are not the ultimate goal, but that they matter. And in fact, I love that there's a mattering movement. Jenny, some listeners may think, well, of course my child knows they matter. Why else would I be investing so much time and money into them? I'd love you to tell us how you think about this idea of mattering.
What all of the healthy strivers I interviewed had in common was that they felt valued for who they were deep at their core, away from their successes and achievements. And they were also relied on to add value back at home, at school, and in the wider community. This feeling valued and adding value, that is what mattering is. And mattering acted like a protective shield. It didn't mean that these kids didn't have setbacks or failures, but what mattering did is that it acted like a buoy. It lifted them up. The kids I met who were suffering the most either felt like their mattering was contingent on their performance, as in they only were valued when they were succeeding. And the other group were kids who felt like their parents valued them, but they were never relied on to add meaningful value back to anyone other than themselves. And these kids lacked what I call in the book social proof that they mattered. They heard it in words, but they didn't see it in action.
And for us, Jenny, with some advice for parents who may be worried that their teen might not get into that college that they want to, and, maybe trying to figure out, how can I pull out any help I can for my child? What is your advice?
So many young people today think that a good life is secured by going to a good college. So to start, I think parents can begin by rejecting that premise that the path to happiness or a good life must be found through a top-tier school, because it's just not true. It's just not true. We can offer a much-needed perspective by calling out that myth and telling our kids what we know from decades of research, what actually leads to the good life we want for them. Having good relationships, having purposeful work, feeling like you are making a positive impact in the world around you.
Jennifer Wallace is a journalist, parenting researcher, and author of the book Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It. Jenny, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Live Right, publishers of White Poverty: How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. Reverend William Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove envision how to unite millions of impoverished Americans. White Poverty, available now. This message comes from NPR sponsor Noom. Noom's first ever cookbook, The Noom Kitchen, helps you build new habits for a healthier lifestyle. Check out The Noom Kitchen for 100 healthy and delicious recipes to promote better living. Available to buy now wherever books are sold.
I am, unfortunately, too old to make any top 35 X under 35 list. But honestly, who cares? Well, the answer is me, but I shouldn't, right? Because there are tons of people who did their best work to change their fields when they were older. The writer and CBS Sunday morning correspondent Mo Rocca wrote about a few of them in his book, Roctogenarians, and he talked to Here Now's Tiziana Deering about what makes older people more interesting.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my pants, putting suckers in fear, making the tears rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, explosion.
Now that, of course, is LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, and it has been stuck in my head lately because I've been reading the latest book by CBS Sunday morning correspondent Mo Rocca and Jonathan Greenberg, and it is filled with stories of people who maybe also have been here for years but only achieved success late in life. The book is called Roctogenarians, and Mo Rocca joins us from the NPR studios in New York to talk about it. Mo Rocca, welcome.
Thank you, Tiziana. And I have to tell you, it's uncanny. That is the exact track from LL Cool J that John and I listened to as we wrote this.
All right, well, you channeled it well in the book. It's been on my mind. And this all starts with a question to Chance the Rapper that you ask when he appears on the NPR quiz show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. You ask, is it too late for me to be a rapper? I'm assuming you were kidding?
I was kidding. We were talking about how he approached his lyrics. And then I thought, okay, this will be kind of a fun, sticky question. And I said, is it too late for me to be a rapper? I'm 46. And then he looked at me and without missing a beat, he said, I don't know. It might be too soon. People laughed, but it really hit me. And I thought, my goodness, because underneath that jokey question really was a feeling that maybe I was too old for a lot of things, and maybe I was kind of past my peak. And he responded with a kind of joke that had a lot of meaning.
So instead of a shticky question, it winds up a sticky question for you.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yes, and kind of with an existential response.
And you wind up with this book, and there are so many people in it whose story has actually knocked me out, starting with Estelle Getty, who broke through on TV at age 62 as Sophia on The Golden Girls. Sophia was a widow, lived with her daughter, two other older single women in Miami on the sitcom. Now, Sophia was disinhibited due to a minor stroke, so here she is complaining about some guests that she felt had overstayed their welcome.
2 hours to eat pasta and a lousy salad. Your father could eat dinner, read the newspaper, make love, give himself a pedicure, all within an hour. And he never got up from the kitchen table.
So Estelle Getty specifically made me think of this LL Cool J song, that line, don't call it a comeback, I've been here for years, because she actually said of her role, quote, after 50 years in the business, I'm an overnight success, Mo? Explain.
Well, she had real chops. I mean, she had come up through the theater, off Broadway. She'd been at it for decades. In the meantime, she had married, she'd raised a family, but she never let go of her dream. And she was in her 50s when she went to see a play off Broadway, part of what would eventually become Harvey Fierstein's Torch Song trilogy. And she went backstage to meet the playwright, and she asked him to write a role for her. From that, she was quote-unquote discovered for television. I found it so inspiring, her story, that she held on to her dream, and she had built a real life in the process.
You profile Mary Church Terrell. As a young Black woman, Terrell worked tirelessly on social justice issues, for example, working to end lynching. She worked for women's suffrage. But then at 86, she turns to segregated lunch counters at 86. Tell us about her.
Yeah, I mean, she had more than earned her rest. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to tell her story of rejoining the fight is that when I think of the civil rights era, I first think of the younger heroes, John Lewis at 25 leading the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Martin Luther King Jr. was only 34 when he delivered the I Have a Dream speech. We don't think of the older activists. Mary Church Terrell was 86 when she led these sit-ins at Thompson's restaurant in Washington, D.C. And what I find so particularly powerful about it is that she, like other people in this book, were fighting for a world that at best, they might be able to enjoy for a very brief moment of time. But of course, she was doing it for her children, literal and metaphorical, and her children's children.
So we'll drink a toast to her now. Are you red wine or white wine?
I'm a little clumsy. I mean, just a little bit. So probably white.
So we'll raise a glass of white wine. So we've all heard that adage that fine wine improves with age. Your book includes a couple of great stories about winemakers. I was really struck with Mike Gergich, who, as the chapter title says, was making wine up until he was 100 years old. Tell us about him.
Well, Mike Gergich came from communist Yugoslavia, and he managed to escape from behind the Iron Curtain, made his way through Canada down into California, and in 1976, at a very famous wine tasting where a British promoter had organized a battle between French wines and American wines. It was a white wine represented by Mike Gergich, an American, Californian white wine that ended up triumphing. It really made the reputation of American wines. They were now being taken seriously. So he became a hero on a number of levels. He died only last year, but remains rightly an admired figure.
There is one other wine story that really struck me. Madame Clicquot, she comes to greatness at a time when women weren't supposed to have careers, and she turns widowhood into something quite remarkable.
Right. During her lifetime in France, a married woman was very restricted in what she could do, but a widowed woman had rights. And so once widowed as a very young woman, she took control of what eventually became a champagne empire. And, we wanted to tell the story of how widowhood, while usually very sad, can also be a kind of liberation. It can be both.
So there are a lot of great stories in here, Mo. I mean, more than I thought one could compile in a book of this kind of story. Is there one that's particularly near and dear to your heart?
I find the stories of the writers particularly moving. Frank McCourt, who published his memoir, which became a literary sensation, Angela's Ashes, at the age of 66. For years, he felt that his story simply wasn't worth telling. It was also partly that he was ashamed of his impoverished childhood in Limerick, Ireland. It made me think of my own mother, who is an immigrant from Colombia, and I included her in the book. She's the final chapter, because for so long I knew certain things about her upbringing, but there was a lot I didn't know, because I think she too felt that her story wasn't worth telling. I think she too was a bit ashamed, frankly, of the scarcity of her upbringing. but she surprised me by asking me to write about her. The first time I thought she might be kidding. And when she asked the second time, I realized at her age, in the mid-90s, I can't be exact or she'll kill me. So let's just say it's 4 years short of a really big birthday. I think she does want her story put down.
So, Mo, your mother is the last story in the book. For us today, the last story that I want to do is Brian May, who at the age of 60 earned his PhD in astrophysics. And that really fulfilled kind of a lifelong passion. And that's remarkable enough. Of course, though, kind of had a heck of a first career. Listeners maybe don't already know, but some of them I'm sure are shouting the name of the band that he played for at the radio. But maybe you can fill that in for us.
He is the guitarist for Queen. Brian May is one of rock and roll's greatest guitarists ever. He also was a very, very talented student in astrophysics. He's an exemplar of what we call unfinished business, which I think is, in a sense, most of these stories. People with a passion finally finding the time and the will to do it later in life. I have found in my experience with older people, to be blunt with you, Tiziana, old people are my jam. Okay, I've been profiling them for a long time in CBS Sunday Morning. I prefer them over younger interview subjects. Older people tend to care less about what others think of them than younger people, and they're usually more willing to go for it. We could easily fill 1 volume, 2 volumes, 3 volumes with these stories.
Well, CBS Sunday Morning correspondent Mo Rocca, the book is Roctogenarians, Late in Life Debuts, Comebacks, and Triumphs. It's written with Jonathan Greenberg. Mo, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. If you want more, you can sign up for our newsletter at npr.org/newsletter/books. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Isabella Gomez Sarmiento and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Jacob Gans, Phil Harrell, Hiba Ahmad, Melissa Gray, Courtney Dorning, Erica Ryan, Christopher Intagliata, Lena Muhammad, Thomas Danielian, Todd Muntz, Mark Navin, and Emiko Tamagawa. Beth Donovan is our managing editor. Thanks for listening.
All that sitting and swiping, your body is adapting to your technology. Learn how and what you can do about it.
I really felt like the cloud in my brain kind of dissipated. Once I started realizing what a difference these little breaks were making, there's no turning back for me.
Take NPR's Body Electric Challenge. Listen to the series wherever you get your podcasts.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Vuori, a new perspective on performance apparel. Clothing designed with premium fabrics, built to move in, styled for life. For 20% off your first purchase, go to vuori.com/NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.